Website Treatment Wiki.com presents mesothelioma and asbestosis. Decortication for mesothelioma. Consider the pros and cons of decortication. For some patients with mesothelioma, the best option is surgery. Why? Mesothelioma is typical for the local spread of the neighboring structures such as the chest wall and mediastinum, before the advent of distant metastases. Thus, surgery may also have therapeutic and palliative effect. There are two main types of operations: pleurectomy and pleurectomy. Decortication. Pleurectomy is resected en bloc parietal pleura, lung, pericardium and diaphragm, then the plastic diaphragm and pericardium using Teflon patches. Pleurectomy. Decortication, by contrast, involves resection of the parietal and mediastinal pleura. Mesothelioma affected areas diaphragm and pericardium, and the light stays in place, since it is usually resection margin does not contain healthy tissue. To date, it is not clear whether both of these operations, the principles of oncologic surgery, opinions on the surgical treatment of mesothelioma diverge. In particular, it is unclear whether surgical treatment leads to an increase in survival and quality of life of patients. Study of the issue dealt with in two clinical trials conducted in the UK. The first of them, the mesothelioma and radical surgery (MARS). This study involved patients with operable forms of mesothelioma. At first they received chemotherapy. After that, patients randomly assigned to those carried out on pleurectomy and those who held different treatment. The main criterion for evaluation in this trial: overall survival. Whichever is the pneumonectomy impact not only on overall survival, but also in the quality of life of patients. The second test is called MESA-VATS. In it, patients with newly diagnosed mesothelioma and the presence of pleural effusion were randomly assigned to groups. In one of the groups carried talc pleurodesis, and the other thoracoscopic VATS pleurectomy. The evaluation criteria in this trial include a 1-year survival rate, reduced effusion and quality of life of patients in the two groups. Both tests will help determine what contribution the operation in the treatment of patients with mesothelioma. Another difficult question: how best to identify patients who will benefit from surgical treatment, as well as how to choose the most appropriate type of surgery. Randomized trials comparing the effectiveness of two species-described operations have been conducted. According to available information, the best results: pleurectomy observed in patients with epithelial mesothelioma resection within healthy tissues in the absence of lymph node level N2. Typically, this surgery is performed in younger patients with sufficient spare capacity of the cardiovascular and respiratory systems. Pleurectomy. Decortication is increasingly used for the treatment of older patients. The presence of comorbidity in the case of minimal pleural lesions, as well as an intact interlobar pleura, more appropriate to apply pleurectomy. Decortication. Despite the surgery, most patients relapse mesothelioma. To some extent, the recurrence rate is determined by the type of operation. In patients undergoing pneumonectomy may develop local recurrence on the side of the operation, although the more common occurrence of distant metastases after pleurectomy. Decortication. On the contrary, there is a tendency to local recurrence. To reduce the incidence of local recurrence and distant metastases, using photodynamic therapy, intracavitary chemotherapy and adjuvant and neoadjuvant systemic chemotherapy,